There are so many different ways to get to that, air quote, successful end state. So it's really about what's natural to the human and kind of figuring out their place that gives them energy. Bringing the AI component in is going to take a lot of change. And so I think the trait that's really important is people's ability to adapt and change, and people's ability to kind of think into the future, if you will. And the reason I say that is because the challenge I'm seeing a lot with different founders at the moment is they're looking at what AI is today. And their version of AI today is they've gone into ChatGPT, they've asked it a question, and it was a hallucination that came back. And so their version of it is, oh, it'll never get there and I can never trust it. And I just think, like, I wasn't around in terms of like in business during the dot-com era, but I imagine these would be similar things that would be rhyming back then.
Frank,
Liam, hello.
what fucking car did you just buy?
Mate, I said I'm not I'm not telling people. Nah, I actually don't like. I don't mind talking about it in any way, shape, or form. It's more just the difference between what's the intention behind doing so. So I bought a Lamborghini Urus.
Got you, got you. Had that been something that was like in your kind of dreams for a long time?
Yeah, that was like the dream car for literally the moment they came out. I was like, that's one day I'm gonna get that. And I waited quite some time after the deal to actually do it, but the time had finally come, and I was like, "You know what? I I I think it's time."
I love it. I love it. The Instagram reel of you just revving the car with a cheeky smile on your face. Absolutely excellent. I loved it. Um, to get to a space where you can afford a Lamborghini, you obviously have to do pretty well in life. And I want to kind of start off strong with your LinkedIn tagline. So I see that's kind of about a lot of places, 180 million exit from Realbase. I was wondering if you could summarize this story, the journey of that, from what was the inception behind the name itself. How did you even come up with that to the point where you exit in 3 minutes, if possible?
Yeah, no worries. So it was a 12-year journey from the time we started to the time we finished. Where we started was very boring. So we were here in Australia. Every time a property sells, people spend lots of money on marketing, and the common marketing is printed brochures as well as signboards, these big billboards that sit at the front of a home. And so myself and my two brothers actually started as a signboard company. And so out of our lounge room, we print signboards and go and install them. We did that for 4 or 5 years until we really intimately understood the process. What were the problems, the challenges from the customer side, getting the orders to us and the back and forth. And so what we did is we figured out, when I say we, probably should say not me, my eldest brother, an incredibly smart person, a software engineer taught himself, uh, had come up with this concept, which is let's pivot away from doing the physical services and let's move to a tech play where we become a marketplace. And so the marketplace allows other real estate suppliers, so other brochure companies, signboard companies, digital, to be able to connect into our ecosystem, and then real estate agents can order directly from them. And so that was the inception of our business, which was Real Hub. And over the course of the following 3-ish years, we started to really scale and ramp up and go beyond where we could logistically go in our local area. And to the point where the kind of the one competitor in the space approached us and said, it's time to do a merger. We'd applied enough pressure and taken enough of their work. And so overnight, we went from about 40 people to 400, and that's when I stepped in the role of CEO. And so you'll ask the question, where did the name Realbase come from? Naming a business is a funny thing, right? It's like, I don't get that much enjoyment out of the process, especially, the longer the longer, to 2025 can pick up a name. It's like so hard because all the URLs are taken. So it's more like what's the least bad one. And so Realbase was just, I don't know. I don't even know how we came up with it, but it was just like, okay, it's real estate, it's a base for everything you can do. It's Realbase. so nothing too exciting. But once we merged, we became the number one player by orders of magnitude. So here in the Australian New Zealand market, we had about 47% market share. So almost one in every two properties that sold would come through our platform. And that was the time I decided to take the business through an acquisition. And so we went through the journey of a year-long process to kind of get a competitive bidding war happening between about 10 different parties. And ultimately, that's when Domain bought it for about $180 million.
Did you ever struggle with your identity and who you were after that sale. I imagine like building that business up at being your baby for 12 years, you kind of closely align yourself as I'm Frank at Realbase, I'm Frank at Real Hub. Like that's you. Once you sell that, you get the cash in the bank and you're moving on to different things. Like, who are you at that?
So it's interesting, right? Because that's the it's probably the most common thing someone says when they sell a business. Two things for me. One, I'm very commercial. So, the concept of that's my baby, and I feel like it's my identity didn't really happen too much for me, and the reason why is because for me, there was a transaction, which was, "This is the thing we've created, money is exchanged, that's now your thing." A bit like, selling a home for me, some people are like, "Oh, that was, my family home forever." I'm a bit like, "Well, you paid me money for it, now it's yours." So that was yeah, I didn't get it on that side, and the other part was I spent a lot of time learning through content what other founders had gone through when they sold the business, and I knew there was going to be this inevitable shift of identity crisis slash loss of purpose, and so I knew what I was in for. Therefore, it wasn't a shock. But I think the key challenges was probably you go from being really important, busy, or getting all the phone calls, and then kind of all of a sudden, very quickly, it shifts away from you're no longer the decision maker. You're just kind of a part of the influence to help the business in a particular direction, and that's a very different feeling, especially for someone who has that entrepreneurial spirit. A person who loves being able to create and make decisions. It's a total shift of your mindset of how you got to work in the new world.
Yeah, I mean, you sound very matter of fact with it, which probably speaks to the Aussie attitude in general. This is just how it is. It's pretty much the same in Scotland, no?
I actually don't think so. I don't know why. There might, like most people, it is their baby. There's all those things. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's just the way I was selling in my DNA. I just when it comes to business, there's lots of elements that are, you know, emotional in terms of, so really like the people side of things. That's where I'm not transactional. Like, oh, okay, we've got to go and fire 100 people. No worries, just a transaction. Just go fire them. Like that. That's the stuff where I don't just fall into that transactional mode. But then there's things that are, in my eyes, are purely commercial, and it is logic based and logic driven, and that just is what's natural to me.
Got you. From there, a couple of years pass, and at some point, pretty recently, you start the founders table. With that, you're on a mission to meet every founder doing 10 million plus. I'd love to hear a bit more about kind of the genesis, the idea behind this. Also, is this any what kind of inspired by what Hormozy's doing with acquisition.com? Is that in a similar vein?
Mm, good question and good pickup there, Liam. Well done. so, so post exit, I guess a couple of key things to help bridge that gap. I went on a journey to raise $1 million for children's cancer by writing a cookbook called Eat with Purpose. And because I'm self-publishing that book, and it's out now, the reason because I'm self-publishing it, it meant that I needed to do all the marketing myself, and meant that I needed to get the word spread, and so I had to go, okay, like how do I do that? And so logically, I looked at other people in the in the social media world, and I went, okay, well, the most important thing you need to do is build personal brand. And so I started a podcast, and the podcast is called Chew the Fat, and the podcast is interviewing high performance guests in business as well as athletes. And through that journey, I started to kind of course, grow the audience, which were founders and entrepreneurs. And one day, myself and my brother Jacques, so we've been, spitballing, working on our next business. It's now been 2.5 years since our exit, and so now it's time to go. Okay, cool. What's next? And so one of the key things now is, what is the space that we want to play in, that we can play in for the long haul, and a place that gives us energy, so that each day, you're working hard, but you're enjoying the process through it. And what I realized is through doing the podcast and meeting, the founders and getting to sit down with the guests, I was like, okay, I want to be in a space that these are, inevitably one day my customers. And not in the obvious way, which is, build an ebook or build an online learning platform, but do something that's a really meaningful, that could help other founders and other entrepreneurs succeed. And we decided that we wanted to launch the product this year in July, and we said, okay, what if we did something crazy? What if we launched like in a theater, like Apple style? Where you've got like 2,000 people and you're launching the product. Like no one does that for an MVP. And so we went, okay, how could we possibly do that? And literally it was like a half an hour conversation, Liam. It was, well, in order to do that, we need to know more people, and to know more people, we better meet them. And we're like, well, we can't put it in someone else's hands to go like, okay, we just got to go out there and meet them. Why don't we like kind of be the master of our own destiny? So I literally posted something on my Instagram's stories. I said, I'm gonna host the lunch. I'll be cooking lunch for 8 founders. Apply if you want to join. And within 4 minutes, we hadn't filled up the table enough times to do it 4 times over, and I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." And so we then did the first one and realized, "Okay, shit, this is could be something maybe greater than just this initial concept." And so the two things that were really interesting is if you look at the PayPal Mafia in America, what they did, if you really drill down into the detail, there's I think there's 17 people who are investors in PayPal. Every business that happened after PayPal, there was some kind of interconnectivity between them. So whether it be Elon's raising money or raising capital for SpaceX, inevitably somebody or multiple people are raising with him. And across the lifespan so far, it's been 200 major companies. So thinking SpaceX, Tesla, Airbnb, Facebook, Stripe, like just so many of the big names. And we thought, well, that's like, how could you recreate that? We didn't have investors in our last business. And so we thought, well, that's really interesting. Like if you met every founder doing $10 million, like what would the power of that little black book be like? And so that was really the thinking behind it. And the last piece of the puzzle you mentioned there, at hormoziacquisition.com, I think there is a lot I've learned from what Hormozi has done. The biggest one is like the content being the top of the funnel and that education. And then the idea that, through that content comes businesses that want to have investment. And then he now has acquisition.com to be able to provide investment. Um, that is very interesting. I think there's a world in which a founder-led venture capital company is something that could be very powerful. So definitely there's rhymes and elements that were taken from Hormozi to do it here in Australia.
The world is changing fast. AI is transforming industries, and those who don't adapt will get left behind. If you're not actively learning AI, you're already falling behind your competition. But here's the good news, you don't have to do it alone. When you join the AI Report free community, you'll get immediate access to powerful AI resources that will help you stay ahead. First, you'll receive the first 5 issues of our pro newsletter packed with AI insights trusted by over 400,000 professionals at Google, Microsoft and OpenAI. You'll also get 3 exclusive AI guides from HubSpot designed to help you work smarter and integrate AI into your daily workflow. This includes a complete guide to using ChatGPT at work so you can start impressing your coworkers immediately. Secondly, 200 AI-powered income ideas to help you discover actionable ways to turn AI into a money-making machine. And lastly, 1,000 marketing and productivity prompts. To make sure you start strong, we're including a beginner-friendly AI course that will get you up to speed in under 10 minutes, led by our very own creative director, Arturo Ferreira. Finally, you'll be part of a thriving network of AI-driven professionals. The total value of everything inside is over $549, and today you can get it all for free. Join today and start learning AI instantly. Yeah, awesome. I'm in total agreement with the top of funnel content, and we speak to a bunch of kind of LinkedIn creators, 50,000, 100,000, 500,000 followers, all following the same model, right? If you're building that trust and authority online, and you're giving out free value, a ton of free value, eventually people are going to come inbound to you for services. And it's clear that you're putting in a lot of effort. I don't know who you've hired as a videographer and to do your marketing, but it shows the quality of it. I think that's kind of what brought you on my radar initially was like the quality of your posts on LinkedIn, the podcast, it must be in 8K, the Instagram post. Like there's obviously a ton of effort and thought behind that as well. In that process of creating that top of funnel content, was there a vision that you had in mind? Did you come to a creative agency and you were like, make it exactly like this? Or were you kind of more involved in the process? Like, I want it to be this color grading. I want it to be more muted with this colors. I want there to be lots of oranges and blues.
So it's interesting, right? The same way I see content is the same way I see business. Um, before we sold the business, I had never posted on anywhere. So I didn't have an Instagram account. I occasionally posted on LinkedIn some words. I didn't really focus on it. I cared only, purely about the business we were building. Then I made that decision. Okay, I got to build a personal brand. There was a person that I hired. His name's Kai. When he was 17 in our previous business, he started as an intern, and his skills grew, exponentially through the process of just him wanting to learn. And so as soon as I started the concept behind I got to build a personal brand, he was the first person I spoke to. I said, okay, now this, everything I do, I want it to look and be at a certain caliber, because these all different signals that I'm sending out to the market, which is whatever I do, I care about. Um, but to think about every detail, like the color grading and this and all those elements before you start, in my opinion, is not worth your time. Because in the beginning, you need to get reps on the board, and in the beginning, you need to get signals from the market, which is what I'm talking about. Resonate with an audience, and if you're focused on the minutia, and let's say that first video from the time I hired him to the time we launched was 7 weeks later because we want to make it just right. Um, I wouldn't have gotten the reps that I needed to start to learn from the market. And so what we would do is we would actually just in essentially like almost one take sit down for an hour and film 20 videos. And so I just go back to back to back, no scripts, nothing. I'd post them. And then I try and look at the data and see what are the signals that are coming back. Um, same with the podcast. I'd never interviewed a guest before. And one day I just decided, oh, well, that would be cool to do a podcast called Chew to Fat, sit down with a guest. I cook them, I cook them a meal and then we kick off the interview. Uh, Never done it before. From the idea to the doing was about 2 weeks later. And, Kai had never edited before. And the first version of it sucks. And now it's way better, right? It's just like get the reps in is what matters. So to kind of bring it all the way back to your question, the answer is no. None of the where we are today was sitting down by design and mapping it all out, but it was continual iteration and still to this day. So just yesterday, we posted a piece that we worked on Monday, and immediately we'd see in the data the visual hook was completely off because the amount of people that swiped before 3 seconds. And so it's like, okay, cool, that's a signal to us. And we were like, okay, kind of back solving it. The first frame took too long to get to the punchline, and it wasn't bright enough. So it's just a constant evolution, and I'm so far from where we need to be. But we're starting to feel like we're just starting to get some kind of traction and we're starting to learn, let's call it 10% of what is required. If I look at Hormozy's content, he's at like 85%. He's just fully gets it. And I think we're at 10%. We're like slowly, incrementally getting to where we need to be.
Yeah, I love it. I'm a total proponent of the by reps method as well. So I'm in complete agreement with you there. So you're cooking meals for guests before you record them on the podcast. You're cooking meals for these people that you meet. Have you noticed any peculiarities in how or what super successful people eat? Maybe their mannerisms. Are they always refusing tofu? Is everyone secretly a carnivore?
That's an interesting question, and the answer is actually no. So there's actually no rhyme. There's actually no rhyme to what people want and don't want to eat, which is really interesting. You actually asked that because if you looked at content online, you would probably assume that people, air quotes successful would eat strict and particular and carnivore and this and that. The answer is no. Like there's people who are incredibly successful, who sold their business for hundreds of millions of dollars, and their diet is like they do not almost like hardly understand nutrition, or they do not care about flavor. Like there's like the balance and everything in between. Um, literally no parallels thus far.
Interesting. I assume that would be as much as well. I think in my experience with successful people, there's been two levels. Like one is like that level of guru where they've seen a lot of success. They flaunt a lot of that online. They say you need to do X, Y, and Z. And you need to eat carnivore, you need to do this, you need to do that. Whereas like the real successful people just do whatever they want. They develop a good product or service and that's it. Nothing else really matters aside from that. So I wanted to hear that from a source for someone that has such access. What has cooking taught you about business and vice versa? What has business taught you about cooking?
Mm. So I think the key piece of learnings that I got from being a chef was less so about the cooking, but the environment that I was brought up in when I was a chef. So we used to work 60-hour weeks. There was a thing called a double shift, and a double shift started at 8 a.m. and it finished at 10, 11 p.m., and there was no break in between. And you would do that 3 days a week. You would work Christmas, Mother's Day, Father's Day, Easter, every public holiday there that ever existed. And every time you went into service, which is a 3 hour window where people will start to order, um, you have to be ready. Like there no two ways around it. You got to be ready because the customers are going to come and there's nothing you can do to stop it. So I think the biggest thing it taught me was actually resilience. Was, I would leave, I would drive home, I would get 4 hours sleep, I would wake up again, I would drive an hour back to work, and I would start again, and it didn't no one cared, like, no one in the kitchen was like, "Oh, no, are you tired?" Like, no one gave, um, any cares towards that, and so you just have to you just mold it into this environment where resilience is created. And that would be the biggest thing, the biggest through line that took me from the kitchen into the world of business. Because when we started, what's required to build a business is grinding often, and not necessarily in hours, but it more in output and your ability to handle shit. And I think that's the thing, that it was a very good stepping stone because it wasn't a big shock to me when we had to do what we had to do.
For me, I'm wondering if it's the same with you, but for me, I lived in Australia for a while and landscape during the day, done bartending at night, so double shifting as well. And it was one, the resilience, but two, for me, and I don't know if this is a good form of motivation, but it was, I never fucking want to do this again and do this for the rest of my life where I'm working 13, 14 hours a day. Was there any sort of like hatred of like just working that hard all the time that was driving you as well?
Honestly, no. And the reason why I say that is because I love cooking, and it's kind of probably obvious, right? I'm this many years into the game, and now for whatever reason, I've decided to do a podcast where I cook for people. We're doing the founder set where I cook for people. Like I cook all the time. I cook for my wife and my son 4 or 5 nights a week. So my driver was actually, I could see if I did it for 20 more years, I would hate it. I love it so much that I don't want this career of being a chef to get in the way of my love for food. So the driver was, if I get out of the game of being a chef, that means I will forever love cooking. And that was much more of a driver than get me out of here. Because I wanted to, I kind of thought about myself as like the granddad, or an older person, and I'm still cooking for the family, and that brought me joy, and I didn't want to ruin or take that away from my life.
I love it. It's probably a healthier form of motivation than what I had. But if it works, it works. Who's to say anything? Um, your podcast, A Train of Fat. What do you think is the most common personality trait that you noticed amongst the successful people that you meet? And also a side question, because I want to bring this into AI as well. Do you think that the personality traits to be successful will change with AI now coming onto the scene too?
Probably one of my biggest learnings when it comes to business, which is very contrary to if you only pay attention to content online. People online will often talk about, and it's the stuff the algorithms perform best on, really black and white things. Like, if you do this straight line to success, you will make it. Or if you follow this perfect morning routine, or this perfect sales structure, or this perfect way to market, um, you will become successful. Now, the learnings I've had is the way we did things back in our business was very different. The way, if you looked at my role, what I did as CEO, you wouldn't be like, oh, that's a traditional CEO, because I didn't know what that looked like. And so I just did it my own way. The people I've met through the podcast and outside, you're constantly reminded of is there is no one way that's the perfect way. There are so many different ways to get to that, air quote, successful end state. So it's really about what's natural to the human, and kind of figuring out their place that gives them energy. So I think, I've met people that are, the best way to like tell you what they are is like a business robot. Like they're both financially incredibly disciplined. Everything is down boiled down to, really. building blocks of how to create the perfect business. I've met people who are, high energy, low energy, and everything in between, and all with equal success. And so I think the main thing, if there's through lines, it's probably resilience, the ability to stay in the game. Because everybody I've met has a similar journey, which is a bit like the hero's journey, which is, the challenges to launch, the negatives that happen, the self-doubt, business almost closed down, the people telling them around them that they're gonna fail, and then inevitably stay in the game long enough to make it. So I think the resilience piece is what's really important. But apart from that, there's certainly common traits, but there are so many different traits. So I don't think there's one. And I really like to emphasize that, Liam, because sometimes people will look at someone through the headlines. If you read the headlines of myself, you go, oh well, he must be different. Um, and the reality is, like, when you start to meet these people, you go like, "Oh, this is just a normal person," right? Like, it's just a normal person who, but they have the discipline, and the resilience to stay in the game, and that's the key. Um, and it's like one of my I feel like it's like one of my, the missions I'm on currently is like I'll go do a talk at a stage, and, I know obviously that before I get on the stage that people will have read the headlines and they'll think about the archetype of who I'm going to be. And they're like, "Oh, well, he must just be perfect at business and perfect at life and everything is just sorted." And so, like, my job is when I get there is just to make people go like, "Oh, shit, that's just a normal dude." Like, he's just like, he's just having a laugh. He's a bit silly. He's not perfect with his words. He's made heaps of mistakes, because I think that is much more attractive to everybody to realize that, okay, you can do it too.
Yeah, I mean, the My First Million guys talk about this a lot, and pretty much anyone they've seen in the VC space or just like the San Francisco tech space in general, anyone that's stayed in the game for long enough, 10 years plus, has seen like 9 out of 10 people see success, right? It's like learn your lessons, try again, try again, and try again, and take each of those lessons onto the next business, next venture. It doesn't really matter what it is. Um, and I've realized that too. Like, I come from a working class background in Glasgow, Scotland. It's not one where you're exposed to a lot of opportunities. So you dream of these things. You think, yeah, these people must be different. That's something for other people. And then when you're in these conversations, you're in these rooms with people doing 10 million a year or 100 million a year. You're like, this is just a normal person that's just figured it out to a degree more than me. And if they spent more time learning and educating themselves. So I mean, it's super, super interesting.
Now, you had a question which was, how do I see those traits evolving with AI? I think the to me the I have a lot of like I spend a reasonable amount of my learning time each week, on this topic, the topic of AI. And I think, um, so I have a number of theories, and I'm real conscious, right? Like, because I'm always happy to share my theories, but the reality is, like, there's probably a very low strike rate that I'm gonna get it right because it's changing so much. Um, I think the what will be interesting to see is the trait I believe is going to be the most important one. Um, is if you look at people who have successful businesses, bringing the AI component in is going to take a lot of change. And so I think the trait that's really important is people's ability to adapt and change, and people's ability to kind of think into the future, if you will. And the reason I say that is because the challenge I'm seeing a lot with different founders at the moment is they're looking at what AI is today. And their version of AI today is they've gone into ChatGPT, they've asked it a question, and it was a hallucination that came back. And so their version of it is, oh, it'll never get there and I can never trust it. And I just think, like, I wasn't around in terms of like in business during the dot-com era, but I imagine these would be similar things that would be rhyming back then, right? It's like dot-com era, if you had the word dot-com in your business name, you were worth hundreds of millions just because you're a website company. Today, it's like, if you don't have a website, do you have a business? Because, like, you need one just to kind of survive. Um, Similar thing, just recently, anybody who used the word AI is like, wow, they're worth so much money. I think, if I fast forward in 5 years, it's like, if you're not using it, it's like do you have a business? Because you're leaving so much on the table. So I think for like the first movers, the people who are willing to realize that what it is today is going to be fundamentally different in 2 years, but what is most important is the discipline, the practice of trying it now. Because the challenge that people will face is if they go, oh, it's not ready, and then in 3 years' time it is ready. They then start going, okay, great, now I'll start using it. The problem is the people who have been getting the reps in for the last 3 years, building AI agents, building a lean business from the ground up, they're going to be in a way better position than someone who has to in 3 years' time go, okay, now we need to retrofit our business to bring AI in. Okay, what do we need to do? Oh, well, we need to make sure all of our data is cleansed and has structure and things like that. Well, okay, well you just made it like 3 years more complex to get to that outcome. So I think fast moving and ability to adapt and change is going to be key traits to for people to be successfully embedded into an organization.
Just a real quick interruption to the podcast. I just wanted to let you know about our free daily newsletter. We've been doing this for around a year and a half now. We sent an audience of 400,000 subscribers with readers from the likes of OpenAI, Microsoft, Apple, NASA, and many more organizations like that. All it is a daily digest of everything that's happening in AI, plus tools that you can use, plus automations that you can employ today to save time and earn more money, and everything that's happening in AI in general. So if you want to stay up to date with AI on a daily basis, just subscribe to our newsletter down below. Out of all the founders you meet, what percentage are actually using or implementing AI in their businesses right now, would you say?
We'd be lucky for 3 to 4%, which is super interesting. Yeah, and anybody who says yes, it's at the surface level. So the surface level is I interact with ChatGPT, which putting a question and receiving an answer is like, yeah, it's great, but it's really that's a you've made a small optimization into your day. Let's say previously you Googled it, you went into a few links, it took you 20 minutes to get to the answer. Now it takes you 5. Um, so that's fine. The people who are truly like embedding it into their organization, yeah, it's like 2 or 3%. So there's a huge sorry, so I was just gonna say, like, that's the thing that gets me most excited is, the a lot of people we talk about, like, the radical change that's gonna happen with AI, which it's like I'm very, very bullish on. The thing that's gonna slow it down is people's willingness to give it a go and willingness to have it not be perfect until such time. And the opportunity for people who go, I'm gonna do it is like immense because so many businesses, and maybe it's just a sign of just here in Australia, but I see a lot of people online who talk about AI, but underlying they don't have like a business or an organization. So what they understand is the AI component, and you have people who are building businesses who intimately understand business, but they don't understand AI. I think the spot that I'm really intrigued by is people who intimately understand business and intimately give AI a go, and that's where you'll see no, like Salesforce recently announced that they'll no longer hire engineers in 2025, and they saw a 30% efficiency in their engineering team last year. Like that's like, whoa, that's crazy stuff. Like that's that's like I don't know if that's hundreds of millions or tens of millions of dollars worth of like changes in their team. That's the stuff I'm intrigued by.
How are you practically using AI right now? Beyond just curiosity, how are you actually using it in your operations, your business, and what you do?
So I'm in the I would call myself in the very early phases of it. So I've been paying very close attention for the last 2 years. I've been slowly and incrementally trying to tinker with it. But my phase that I'm in right now is trying to find out what's the best way to utilize it. And so the practical part of that, right? Because that's really vague, Liam, is the practical part is we're launching our business in August. And so we're at the first stages of like wireframing our product, of ideation of what our product is. And so the first part of what we're doing is I'm using it as a really interesting way to collaborate. So the difference between saying, here's a question, give me an answer. For me, it's like, okay, what I'm focusing on is how do I best interact with this tool? So let's say it's ChatGPT. And what I'm learning is, every time I listen to someone who's like deeply understands the space, their view is like, you never use ChatGPT or a different LLM and say, I would like this thing and create like a really vague prompt and then get back a response and you're like, great, that's perfect. Like they just do not use it like that. What they'll do is they'll have a perfect structured prompt that they've been working on for months or if not a year, And what they'll feed into ChatGPT, and I'll just use ChatGPT as an example for now, but insert LLMs that people want to use. They'll feed it a prompt, which is, let's pretend you say to ChatGPT, uh, what I'm going to work on with you is you're the best LLM prompt engineer. And here's the exact structure I want you to follow when you give me the prompt, and here's the steps. And so they'll feed that into it. It'll come back and it'll say, great, what is the theme or topic? You deliver then your context. It comes back to you and it gives you now the detail you see that it provides you to give back to it is like what a normal person who's first tinkering with it, they'll give it 20 words. When it's providing a prompt for itself, it's like 400 words. It's like multiple layers of depth, like all the nuances thought about. And then you go and start a new thread and give that prompt back. And the level of detail and the orders of magnitude of how much better it is crazy. And so back to your question, is like, how am I practically using it? Today, what we do is we have been creating like the context around what our product is. And so trying to perfectly structure that context so that when we talk to it, it can collaborate with us on a particular point. So, a recent version of this is we've been doing name ideation. And so it's like, what is the perfect name for our business? Now we get to where our kind of creativity stops. You then feed in the prompt, it feeds you back several names, and now you're using it. We almost using it like a third co-founder in the creative process. So that's one element. The next is like, for example, I'm trying to use the same discipline in my podcast. So, now the model is, the persona it's in is you're an incredibly experienced interviewer who likes to think about depth and business knowledge. I'm going to feed you the questions I have, and we're going to start to collaborate. And it'll output a series of incredible questions that I hadn't thought about. So what I like to do is rather than starting on a blank slate, it asks me, I ask it something, it gives me back 5 points. I'd rather I start and I get to where my creativity or my thinking ends. I then feed it there, and then its context that it delivers back to me is it's significantly better, and therefore I'm actually adding to it rather than like it just giving me the information. Because if you do that, the information is no longer vanilla and it's now like thought of. But now let's take it a layer deeper. Our first hire is actually someone tasked with a job, which is we want to build an organization that gets to $1 billion in valuation. Now, traditionally and very commonly, that is going to have hundreds of people. Our view of the world is as it rapidly evolves, what we don't want to do is build an organization that gets bloated and the market determines to us, well, you're not efficient. And so you inevitably have to go and fire people if you want to stay in the game. Now, my problem with that is I have high degrees of empathy, and I cannot bring myself, knowing the knowledge I have, to go and sit down and fire a bunch of people who've been along the journey from day one. So he's tasked with the job of how do we create an organization that could have 50 or 100 people, the highest performing people possible, and everything that can be done is done through AI. And so what he's done and built for us and today it's like the theoretical element is what does an AI org chart look like and the different elements in an AI org chart. And I'll get really specific for you so that it's valuable to the audience. So at the top of the org chart, you've got a router agent. And so the router agent simply, I'm either interacting with voice through WhatsApp, through Slack, through what insert tool here, and I might say, I need to I need to book a podcast and I'm traveling to Melbourne on Tuesday. And so then that router agent sees that the request I've made is going to require several different agents below it to achieve the outcome. So the router's agent is only has one job, which is choose the right AI agent to get the job done. So it takes your task, it splits it up into multiple tasks, and then goes down to the next layer, which is an AI manager. And the manager's task is to find the right agent in its toolkit. So underneath one might be there's a travel agent AI agent. Underneath that is one that's interacting with your email. Underneath that, there's one that is interacting with your Google Calendar. And so each one of these has a separate individual task. They then complete the task, fire it back to the AI manager. The AI manager checks the work, sends it back to the router, and the router sends it back to us. And so we've built out this entire org chart and process. And so we're in the I should use the word process again. I was trying to find new words that didn't sound the same. we're in the process of going. piece by piece, what is going to make the single biggest impact to our time as founders? Because right now that's the focus is how do we make sure that if we can be more efficient, then we don't have to go and hire people to take over certain roles. And so piece by piece, we're focusing on the AI agents and AI agent processes to reduce our need to hire as we start to progress.
I really want to dive into what this billion-dollar company is, see how much you can actually reveal this little black book that you've spoken about. But firstly, because we're kind of touching on it here, right? What you've described here with the AI agents and the AI managers, we see this done in a lot of businesses, right? And for you, like it's as little lift as possible because all you need to do is send a voice note to WhatsApp and all of those tasks is done for you. So I guess my question for you is in this new environment where we're creating businesses in a new way, what's your ideal version of work?
My ideal version of work is always what gives me the most energy. So yeah, through the process of learning over 12 years, you realize there are tasks that you do that you feels like you're pushing shit up a hill, that steal your energy, and inevitably you do them slower and not as well. Then there are tasks that when you do them, you get to think to yourself, God, I can't believe this is called work. I'm having so much fun. Right. And so, like, the founders table is a great example of that. The founders table, which is, meeting founders and entrepreneurs who, again, the power of that little black book is going to be immense. I get to sit down at lunch with people. We've got 1 in 2 weeks' time, and we're doing a lunch and a dinner, and we've rented a yacht for this one, and it costs $5,500 an hour, and we rented it for 10 hours. Now, that's an unreasonable amount of money to spend, but because we really want to make an impact in the Australian ecosystem, that people go like, "Whoa, what are these guys doing?" And we do not charge for this experience; it's completely free. At lunch, we have 3 people who've created businesses that are worth $1 billion, and the rest are 100 million plus revenue, and we've got 9 of them. At dinner, we have 15, and they're ranging from 10 million all the way to 250 million in revenue. And I get to go on that boat and sit down there with the founders, and I get to call that work, right? Like that's not fair. That's so much fun, right? Like that's my dream. I'm looking forward to that. And so could it bring it all the way back to your question, like what is my ideal? My ideal is being in a place of flow where I have the maximum amount of leverage. And for me, a lot of the time that's with people. So whether those people be, one day they'll be our customers, or one day they'll be people that we'll be doing deals with. Insert all the versions that can be created from the founders table, spending time there, or spending time internally with team members where, we have high performing team members who are, really hungry, have drive, and I can help like elevate their skills and capabilities. That's the place where my ideal work comes from. So I have this interesting kind of thesis around what the world will look like once AI is in, and but in a big way. If you really think about it, if everything becomes easier from a tech perspective, i.e., you can talk to AI and say, build me this piece of software. And like, I don't know if it will be able to, but imagine if it could, it just build you custom bespoke the exact software you were talking about. Let's hypothesize that's the answer. As well as, create me a marketing campaign, content schedule with all of the stuff, and it just does it. Once everything from that layer becomes almost too easy, the piece that is most important in my view is actually people. The skill of relationships, whether they be people inside your business or people external, becomes the thing that AI cannot solve for. So it can't go and make you, when you're in a room, have an energy that attracts people, that makes people want to be with you, that makes you be a leader, that people want to work with you. It cannot do that for you. So to me, that is the skill that is most important in the new world. And the more people rely on the technology to do everything for them, like a recent one is AI cold calls. So, not making those cold calls, it's doing it for you, it's booking meetings, and the next permutations of that is like, will it do that first meeting for you and close the deal? It's like, okay, well, you're not getting your reps in of how to have difficult conversations, uncomfortable conversations on trying to be something in a room that it has people, attracted to who you are. Well, now less people are going to know how to do that. And so if you push yourself towards that goal of going, okay, I have to get really good at interpersonal relationships, That's what I think is my ideal, because I think that's where you can actually thrive in business if you focus on that.
How has that exact insight influenced this creation of your new business? And what can you tell me about everything you're doing?
No worries. So the only reason we haven't been sharing it, Liam, is not because we're worried people will steal our idea. I think that's what a lot of first time founders get concerned about. They send you an NDA and they're worried that you're going to take it. The truth is, an idea is worth nothing. It's the execution behind it. The reason we haven't been sharing is because we were building intrigue. We like to try and build in the marketing into the launch of our product. So I think that the easiest way to answer that without trying to give away all the details is this: the entire business and the thesis of the product is built off this thinking of what the new world will look like. So the product will be focused around experienced founders, and it will help them in the new world, help them as AI, essentially changes everything. It will help them be in a place where they have to focus on this relationship piece. So that's probably what I will share, and it's really celebrating your circle of influence. We'll call it that. So, because a big part of our decision, right, was if we build another tech company that leverages all of the AI, and then like everything rapidly changes and it's all about, the smartest people you have in the room, and like ideas actually do become worth something because people can just build out your idea in 2 seconds, then it's like, okay, we need to have something that essentially has a moat that if, let's say, for example, that happens, well, what is it that this is completely different to everything? And I think the relationship piece is key. Now, I'm not talking about like we're building a social media platform, is that that's its own, and it has its own challenges and its own challenges in the new world too.
Yeah, I'm incredibly excited. The part of my job that I enjoy the most is podcasting, is talking to people like yourself, is having real life conversations, is sales calls, developing relationships. 100%. If I could just sit and talk to people all day, people would listen to me and I can listen to them. Amazing. I want to round things off with two things. Firstly, I want to share one of the LinkedIn posts you made, because I think it really kind of succinctly recaps everything we've talked about today. And then two, I want to ask you one last question and hear your thoughts on it. So you posted this on LinkedIn, I think, in the past week. Um, One of the all-time classic business books by Marshall Goldsmith. What got you here won't get you there. It talks about the need to shift in order to grow. This is true. However, the longer you're prepared to do stuff that doesn't make sense, the bigger outcome you can achieve. I was wondering if you could tell me more about like why you wrote this on a practical, on an emotional level.
Myself and my brother Jacques, who I'm building the next business with, and we founded the last one. Um, Once you meet us and get to know us, we would actually turn a lot of people off who we are, if I'm really honest. And the reason is because we're sickly obsessed with business, and we talk about it all the time. And so we'll be tossing and turning concepts, or trying to reverse engineer, why is it that we're creating value? Like, what is it in the marketplace? And the other day we were talking about this concept, which is like, what's our unfair advantage? What's the thing that we have available to us that other people do not or are not willing to do? And one of the things we realize is, with an unfair advantage, that in the different stages of your business, it shifts and changes. And the thing that we had in the early days is we were prepared to do things that were unreasonable and did not make sense, and did not make sense to people around us. And so an example of that might be, we started a small business, we're, we've grown a team of 30, 40 people, and a customer calls, it's a Saturday, 11 a.m., and they say, "Hey, I've got this issue." And, you know, I got on a plane and I went and solved their issue on the weekend because I was like, I'm not prepared for them not to have something done. Now, if you look at that from an economic standpoint, the order that they had done was $80. The plane ride, my time it was about, $1,500. So that does not make sense. Now, the longer you're in the game, what we see is people become, air quote, successful, and they're no longer prepared to do those things that they once did. And what we realize about ourselves is we are prepared to do it, and we don't see it stopping anytime soon. And we realized that the longer you're prepared to do that kind of stuff, the more impact it has. So let me bring it down to like practical what happens today. Hiring a boat and spending $55,000 to invite people to a free lunch that you never sell to them anything and all you're doing is creating value. From the outset, it doesn't make sense. Okay. Inviting people to my home, um, cooking them lunch, and some of them have done 200 grand in business, and they get to sit here with us for 2 3 hours. I've in the morning I went and got the food, I prepared it, and I've done it. Doesn't make sense, right? Like there's so many of these things that don't make sense. Or let me be specific with something like podcasting. There will be people that I really want on the podcast who will say, I'm happy to do it, but I don't fly to Sydney. And I said, no worries. And I get on the plane and I go do it. So, yesterday we did 3 flights in 24 hours. We flew to Melbourne, did an episode of a podcast, got on a plane, flew to Gold Coast, did an episode of a podcast, and then flew home. Now, in totality, that thing cost me way more money than it creates. And the archetype of me, the person who sold their business for that amount of money, doesn't do that kind of stuff. And so to kind of bring it all the way back is the reason I wrote that LinkedIn post is I realized if people realize there are certain actions that if you do stay with, so the idea of, what got you here won't get you there is 100% true. But there are certain things that actually, if you keep doing them, they'll get you even further. Because, don't let this version of, well, now I'm successful, now people should come to me. Like, "Oh, no, no, well, now no, 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 like, my business was bigger than their business, so they should think it's a privilege to see me." I'm like, "No, no, 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 don't worry about that. I'm in it for the long, long game. So I will do what is required, and I'll do what is unreasonable, because I know where that's gonna get me over the long haul, regardless if it makes sense to another person."
I'm hoping this last question taps into the why behind that. So I asked this question to every one of my guests, and take this question however you want. I'm not going to provide any more context. Why do you do what you do?
Multiple reasons. Fundamentally, I do what I do because I am incredibly commercially driven, and I love building things. So, you know, if I stop doing what I'm doing today, th the energy I have inside me will probably be redirected to the wrong things, and before you know it, I'll be like, "What am I doing in my life?" And the other part is, I believe that to make a really big impact in the world, and my, like, life mission is to make a net positive impact on as many people as possible. I believe that the way I will do that is through business, because if I can build something huge that creates a capital machine. And through that journey, I can inspire others to do the same. And then I can help people understand that you can tie profit and business into impact in the world. I think that's how I create the biggest, most positive change. And the last reason is I love what I do. Like there's no two ways around it. I love what I do. And I previously loved what I did, not because of the specific industry I was in, but because the process of building a business, and all the different things that happen in between, who you become, is the stuff that gets me really excited. And so that's probably the three key reasons.
Frank, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for taking an hour of what I imagine is an incredibly busy schedule. So I appreciate it. Thank you for coming on.